The vidlink cast harsh light through the darkened dormitory, throwing flickering shadows across the faces of the shocked Pac-led students huddled around the screen, witnessing a scene so bizarre it defied comprehension. A human woman kneeling in the streets of Kuala Lumpur, sobbing and clutching her daughter's lifeless body, shrapnel wounds peppering the little girl's chest and throat from the terrorist bomb. Emir leaned in closer, ignoring his stunned peers, studying the grieving mother with unwavering intensity. But now, watching this mother cradle her dead child, oblivious to the blood and chaos around her, lost in a world of unfathomable grief, Emir felt a strange twisting in his gut. A suspicion took root in his mind, dark and dangerous. Perhaps there was a strength in the humans' family bonds, a power in their love for their children, that Pac-led society lacked and desperately needed. He glanced at his fellow students, his resolve hardening. It was time to begin the research project he had proposed, a scientific study of human parent-child attachment. Time to venture into the unfamiliar streets of Boston in search of answers, even if it meant risking his life and reputation. For the good of his species, he had to understand the human secret. Emir sprinted through the unfamiliar streets of Boston, his heart pounding, legs shaking with the shocking images from the news broadcast. The grieving mother's anguished cries echoed in his ears as he ran, her raw display of love and loss seared into his memory. He had to understand this strange human bond between parent and child, had to unravel the mystery of their baffling emotional attachment. "Hey, are you all right?" Emir whirled at the voice, tensing as a human woman approached. She looked to be in her mid-30s, with kind green eyes and honey blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore pale blue nurse's scrubs. "I'm Maggie," she said gently, stopping a few feet away. Her gaze flicked over his gray skin and pronounced cranial ridges. "You're one of those Pac-led exchange students, aren't you? From Harvard?" "You look like you could use some help," Maggie said. "My apartment is just around the corner. Why don't you come with me and we'll get you cleaned up and fed? Then we can figure out how to get you back to your group." Emir wavered, torn between suspicion and a bone-deep exhaustion. This woman seemed to genuinely want to assist him, and truthfully, he needed aid, needed time to collect himself and determine his next steps. "Thank you," he replied hoarsely. "I would be most grateful for your hospitality." Meanwhile, back at Harvard, Zachary burst into the Pac-led students' dormitory, eyes wild with panic. "Emir is missing," he shouted. "We have to find him, now! The Emperor has threatened to send a war fleet if he's not located within 24 hours. The Pac-led scholars surged to their feet, erupting into frenzied chatter. This was a catastrophe of the highest order. They quickly divided into search parties and set out to comb the streets of Boston, desperate to find their missing peer before it was too late. Emir absorbed her words like a sponge, trying to reconcile this foreign concept of a mother's devotion with the cold, sterile, communal child-rearing practices of his own species. How could individual parents invest so much time and emotion into their offspring? It seemed hopelessly inefficient. And yet, little did he know that across the city, his face was flashing across every news channel as Zachary made an impassioned plea for information, that his fellow students were searching desperately, the specter of interplanetary war looming over their heads. For now, ensconced in the warmth of Maggie's apartment, Emir was blissfully unaware of the turmoil his disappearance had sparked. Yet as Emir finally drifted off to sleep, emotionally and mentally drained, one thought filled him with calm certainty. Regardless of what challenges the next day brought, his encounter with Maggie had been worth it, had given him a priceless glimpse into the very heart of the human species. And that was a gift beyond measure. Emir sat up, his mind racing. He had to return to Harvard immediately. His fellow students needed to hear about his experience, about the profound insights he'd gained into human familial bonds. "Good morning," Maggie said, poking her head into the living room. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," Emir replied. "But I must go. My peers will be worried." Maggie nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course, let me drive you back to campus." Within minutes, the Pac-led students had gathered in their common room. Emir stood before them, his gray skin flushed with excitement. "I propose that each of us spends a week living with a human family," Emir explained. "We'll immerse ourselves in their daily lives, participate in their routines, forge genuine connections. Ymir raised his hands, silencing the group. Listen to me. I spent less than a day with a human mother and her child, and it changed everything I thought I knew about family dynamics. Imagine what we could learn in a week. He described his time with Maggie, the warmth of her home, the depth of emotion in her stories about her own mother. As he spoke, he saw uncertainty replace skepticism in his peers' eyes. Can you show me how to do Pakled math? Liam asked one evening as he struggled with his homework. Ymir hesitated, then nodded. He began explaining Pakled mathematical concepts, simplifying them for Liam's understanding. To his surprise, the boy's eyes lit up with genuine interest. This is so cool, Liam exclaimed. Mom, did you hear that? Ymir says they use base 12 for everything. Across town, Zara found herself in a very different situation. The family she was staying with was in crisis. Their teenage daughter, Emily, had run away from home after a heated argument. Zara observed the parents' frantic worry, their tearful phone calls to Emily's friends. She saw the depth of their love in their anguish, in their refusal to give up hope. Without hesitation, Zara offered her help. I have access to advanced tracking technology, she told them. With your permission, I could attempt to locate Emily. The parents agreed immediately. Hours later, thanks to Zara's Pakled tech, Emily was found safe at a friend's house. As the family reunited in a tangle of tears and tight embraces, Zara felt a strange ache in her chest. She realized, with a jolt of surprise, that she envied them their closeness. But first, they had to figure out how to translate their personal experiences into scientific data. As Zachary joined them, notepad in hand, Ymir took a deep breath. The real work was just beginning. Ymir leaned forward, his gray fingers steepled under his chin as he addressed the group. Our homestays have given us invaluable insight, but we need to go deeper. I propose we conduct in-depth interviews with human parents who have made extreme sacrifices for their children. Zara's eyes lit up. Brilliant. We can use our emotion scanning technology to analyze their neurological responses as they recount their experiences. Zachary, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. I can help identify suitable candidates for your interviews. I know of several compelling cases that might interest you. Over the next few days, the Pakled students prepared for their interviews. They calibrated their advanced scanning equipment and developed a series of probing questions designed to elicit emotional responses. When they placed Jack in my arms for the first time, James said, his voice cracking, I knew I'd do anything for him. Anything. Ymir watched in fascination as the scanner's display lit up, showing a surge of activity in James's limbic system. So when the doctors said he needed a kidney transplant, James continued, there was no question. It was terrifying, sure, but I'd have given him both kidneys if I could. James closed his eyes, his hands trembling slightly. Scared out of my mind, but also calm because I knew I was doing the right thing, the only thing. As the week progressed, the Pakled students interviewed more parents. Michelle Davis, her eyes bright with pride as she spoke of her daughter's ballet performances. Mark Erickson, his scarred hands tracing the air as he recounted rushing into a burning building to save his son. During one such break, Ymir found himself sitting alone in the common room, staring at his hands. Zachary approached, a concerned look on his face. Zachary nodded, understanding in his eyes. It's overwhelming, isn't it? Listen, I've been thinking, would you be interested in continuing your connection with Maggie as a sort of ongoing mentorship? Ymir's face lit up. Yes, I would like that very much. I'm honored to be your mentor, Maggie said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. And I'm excited to learn more about your culture, too. As Ymir walked back to the dormitory, his mind raced with the implications of their research. The neurological patterns they'd uncovered were undeniable. The human capacity for parental love wasn't just an emotional phenomenon, it was hardwired into their very biology. He found his fellow students gathered in the common room, poring over data and comparing notes. Ymir took a deep breath and addressed the group. Knowledge, and far more challenging to their worldview. As the days passed, the Pakled students found themselves grappling with the implications of their research. Their initial focus on traditional family structures had yielded profound insights, but Emir sensed there was more to uncover. "We need to broaden our scope," he announced during a team meeting. "Human families come in many forms, not just biological ones." Zara nodded enthusiastically. "I've been reading about found families, groups of unrelated individuals who form deep emotional bonds. It could provide a fascinating new dimension to our research." Emir and Zara found themselves at the doorstep of the Sullivan household. Tom Sullivan, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a welcoming smile, ushered them inside. "They're family now," Tom said simply, ruffling Nathan's hair as the boy giggled. Emir watched in fascination as Tom interacted with Mia and Nathan. There was no biological connection, yet the love and protection in Tom's eyes were unmistakable. The PAC-led students meticulously documented the unique rituals and traditions through which these found families strengthened their bonds. They observed movie nights where inside jokes flew thick and fast, impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, and quiet moments of unwavering support during times of stress. Weeks passed, and the PAC-led team found themselves changed by their experiences. They had witnessed acts of selflessness and commitment that defied their previous understanding of family dynamics. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Liam looked up at Emir with a mischievous grin. "You know, for an alien, you're pretty cool. You're like my weird space uncle or something." In a solemn presentation to the Harvard student body, Zara unveiled their groundbreaking discoveries. Brain mapping evidence showed that the human family bonding process activated ancient neural networks shared by all sentient species, networks the PAC-leads had suppressed through their culture of detachment. "Our findings suggest," Zara explained, her voice steady despite the weight of her words, "that we PAC-leads have been consciously denying ourselves a core component of developed sentience." The auditorium fell silent as the implications sank in. Millennia of PAC-led cultural evolution were suddenly called into question. As the presentation concluded, Emir felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Zachary, a look of profound understanding on his face. As the auditorium buzzed with excited conversation, Emir knew that their journey was nowhere near the end. In fact, it was just beginning. "You're letting human sentimentality cloud your judgment," Graldor sneered during a heated debate in their common room. "Centuries of PAC-led progress, and you'd throw it all away for, what? Hugs?" Emir stood his ground, his voice steady. "It's not about hugs, Graldor. It's about a fundamental aspect of sentient development that we've been denying ourselves." "Enough," he bellowed. The room fell silent. "We need to approach this rationally. I propose we present our findings objectively to the PAC-led emperor, letting the data speak for itself." Emir felt a chill run down his spine. He knew he couldn't let that happen. In a bold move, he requested an audience with the university chancellor. With trembling hands, Emir prepared for his video presentation to the PAC-led High Council. Maggie and Liam sat nearby, offering silent support. Suddenly, shouts erupted from the council chamber. "Blasphemy!" one member cried. "This goes against everything we stand for." "By order of the military command, this transmission is terminated," a gruff voice announced. The screen went black. "We have to do something," Liam said, his young face etched with worry. Zachary burst into the room, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "Graldor," he panted. "He contacted the military. They're detaining any students who supported the research." Maggie sprang into action. "We need to keep Emir safe. There's a loophole in the international student agreement. If we claim him as our legal ward..." As Maggie and Zachary worked feverishly to secure Emir's asylum, reports flooded in of unrest on the PAC-led homeworld. Human governments issued stern warnings, threatening sanctions against the PAC-led regime. Days later, Emir found himself in a safe house with Maggie's family, watching news reports of protests erupting across PAC-led cities. The magnitude of what they'd set in motion was staggering. "I never meant for this to happen," Emir whispered, his gray skin ashen. As night fell, Emir stared out the window at the twinkling stars. Somewhere out there, his homeworld was in turmoil because of what he'd discovered. Yet he knew, deep in his core, that they couldn't turn back now. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, but the profound truth they'd uncovered. The safe house door burst open, startling Emir from his reverie. 3 armed figures in Pac-led military uniforms stormed in, their weapons trained on the alien student. "By order of the High Command, you are to be detained and returned to the homeworld," the lead soldier barked. Maggie leapt between Emir and the intruders. "You can't take him! He's under our legal protection now!" The soldier sneered. "Your human laws mean nothing to us." Before Emir could react, a stun blast hit him square in the chest. As consciousness faded, he heard Maggie's anguished cry and Liam's muffled sobs. He awoke in a sterile cell, surrounded by familiar faces, his fellow students who had supported the research. Graldor stood outside, a smug expression on his face. Days blurred together as Emir and his companions endured endless interrogations. They clung to their convictions, refusing to denounce their discoveries despite mounting pressure. Meanwhile, on Earth, Zachary paced Maggie's living room. "We can't just sit here while they're imprisoned," he fumed. Maggie nodded, her face set with commitment. "I've been granted legal guardianship over Emir. That has to count for something." Their efforts bore fruit. Within weeks, the human government issued a strongly worded ultimatum to the Pac-led regime: release the students or face crippling economic sanctions. On the Pac-led homeworld, unrest simmered beneath the surface. High Council member Tryla, intrigued by the suppressed research, began covertly distributing copies of Emir's presentation. The underground movement grew, fueled by long-dormant emotions finally given voice. Tryla's impassioned speeches ignited a spark of revolution in the hearts of reform-minded Pac-leds. As civil disobedience spread across major cities, the emperor's grip on power weakened. Tryla seized the moment, organizing a daring raid on the military compound where Emir and the others were held. Under cover of darkness, rebel forces breached the facility's defenses. Alarms blared as Emir's cell door slid open, revealing Tryla's determined face. "Come quickly," she urged. "We don't have much time." They rushed through chaos-filled corridors, dodging energy blasts and toppling guards. As they neared the exit, a squad of loyalist troops cut off their escape. In the ensuing firefight, Emir watched in horror as rebels fell around him. The stench of ozone and blood filled the air as he scrambled for cover. As dawn broke, news of the bloody raid spread like wildfire. Outrage at the regime's violent crackdown galvanized the populace. Sensing the tide turning, the emperor made a calculated decision. Emir nodded, his mind racing. "We need a new cultural framework," he mused. "One that embraces our capacity for love without abandoning our intellectual pursuits." For days they debated, drawing inspiration from human mythologies and the vast tapestry of cosmic existence. Gradually, a revolutionary doctrine took shape, one that elevated familial bonding to a cornerstone of Pac-led identity. "We must bring this message to our people," he told Tryla. "It won't be easy. The old guard will resist." Together they prepared to smuggle their manifesto back to the Pac-led homeworld, knowing that the real struggle for their civilization's soul was only beginning. Emir's heart raced as he and Tryla huddled over the encrypted transmission device. Their fingers flew across the interface, uploading the final version of the familial bonding doctrine to their network of underground operatives across the Pac-led homeworld. "It's done," Tryla breathed, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. But the jubilation was short-lived. The Emperor's forces descended with brutal efficiency, energy weapons cutting through the masses. Screams of pain replaced chants of freedom as thousands were rounded up and hauled away to detention centers. Meanwhile, on Earth, Maggie Sullivan's living room had transformed into a war room. Screens flickered with news reports from the Pac-led homeworld, each more dire than the last. Maggie nodded, already dialing her phone. "I know just the person." Ambassador James Moreau's face appeared on the largest screen. "Ms. Sullivan, I've been expecting your call. The situation on Pac-led is concerning." "It's worse than concerning, James," Maggie replied. "It's a humanitarian crisis. We need sanctions, and we need them now." As Moreau worked diplomatic channels, Dr. Eliza Choi held press conferences, presenting irrefutable evidence of the regime's atrocities. Public outrage grew, and soon the Security Council convened in an emergency session. "Incoming fire!" a technician shouted. The base rocked with explosions. Emir grabbed Tryla, dragging her toward the evacuation pods. As they ran, a transmission crackled through. Aboard their escape craft, Emir's hands shook as he piloted through the debris field. "We can't keep running," he said, his voice low and determined. For weeks, Castillo drilled the resistance fighters in covert operations. They learned to move silently, to disable security systems, to fight with ruthless efficiency. The night of the royal banquet arrived. Emir's team infiltrated the palace, moving like shadows through opulent corridors. The sound of shattering crystal and panicked screams signaled the operation's start. Emir burst into the throne room, energy weapon raised. The emperor stood defiant, sneering at his nephew. "You would destroy everything we've built," the emperor spat. He pulled a data crystal from his pocket. "This contains proof of everything we've discovered. Surrender now, or I destroy it, and with it, any chance of a peaceful transition." As Tryla's interim council took control, Emir allowed himself a moment of relief. But he knew the fight was not nearly finished. Reports of Graldor gathering loyalist forces in the outer colonies kept the resistance on high alert. "Incoming transmission," the palace's AI announced. "Priority 1. Emir's fist clenched. "How bad?" "They've fortified a base on Dragvix. Our intelligence suggests they're planning strikes against our new family bonding initiatives." Before Emir could respond, an explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared as smoke billowed from a nearby educational center. "It's begun," Tryla said grimly. Over the next weeks, chaos engulfed the Pac-led territories. Schools implementing parent-child bonding programs were reduced to rubble. Assassins targeted key reform leaders. Emir found himself constantly on the move, barely evading attempts on his life. A chime from her comm device interrupted their discussion. Ambassador Moreau's face appeared, his expression grim. "Maggie, I'm afraid I have terrible news." Across Pac-led space, the assassinations sparked widespread riots. Crowds demanded vengeance, their newfound emotions erupting in waves of violence. "Sir?" A junior officer approached hesitantly. "There's someone here to see you. A human." Frank Castillo strode in, his weathered face set with purpose. "I hear you've got a pest problem." Emir raised an eyebrow. "That's putting it mildly." "Graldor, please," Emir pleaded, lowering his weapon. "This madness has to end." Graldor's eyes blazed with hate. "You're the one who's mad," he snarled, lunging forward with a vibroblade. Emir barely dodged the attack, feeling the weapon slice through his armor. They grappled, crashing into consoles and overturning furniture. Graldor's strength was fueled by rage, and for a moment, Emir felt his grip weakening. "Couldn't let you have all the fun," the human grinned. With Graldor's death, Emir had hoped for a respite. Instead, the militants splintered into dozens of cells, each more vicious than the last. Hit-and-run attacks left colonial outposts in ruins. The dream of a peaceful transition seemed to be slipping away. In a secure conference room on Earth, Dr. Eliza Choi presented her findings to a somber group. "The dissidents' brains show significant atrophy in regions associated with empathy and bonding," she explained. "But our latest research suggests these pathways can be reactivated." "I'll do it," Emir interrupted. "If there's even a chance of ending this bloodshed, I have to try." Weeks later, Emir lay on an examination table, his head surrounded by a web of sensors and neural interfaces. Dr. Choi's voice guided him through a series of visualizations, each designed to stimulate dormant emotional centers. "Picture yourself holding an infant," she instructed. "Feel its warmth, its vulnerability." One morning, as Emir reviewed security footage, he found himself fixated on an image of Liam. A wave of emotion crashed over him, fierce, primal, overwhelming. For the first time in his life, Emir understood what it meant to feel like a father. Word of Emir's transformation spread. Slowly, cautiously, other extremists began to come forward, volunteering for the reintegration program. With each success, the tide of violence receded. A year after Graldor's death, Emir stood on a platform overlooking a vast crowd. Families, real Pakled families, gathered to celebrate the new era. As he began to speak, Ymir caught sight of Maggie and Liam in the front row. His heart swelled with an emotion he was only beginning to understand. "My fellow Pakleds," he began, his voice ringing out across the square. "Today, we take the first steps on a journey that will reshape our civilization, a journey guided by the wisdom of our human friends and the strength we find in each other." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Ymir knew challenges still lay ahead. The work of building a truly integrated Pakled society had only just begun. At the heart of this transformed society stood the Ymirian Academy, its gleaming spires a beacon of progress. Inside its halls, Ymir, his hair now streaked with silver, observed a classroom filled with young Pakleds engaged in lively discussion. Later that day, Ymir stood before a packed auditorium as Phylar took the stage for her symposium presentation. The audience, a mix of pack leads and visiting human dignitaries, listened intently as she spoke. After the presentation, Ymir found himself surrounded by eager young Pakleds. "Elder Ymir," one asked, practically vibrating with excitement, "is it true we might be able to study on Earth?" Ymir nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Indeed, I believe it's time for a more immersive cultural exchange." The night before departure, Phylar sat in her family's living unit, packing the last of her belongings. A knock at the door revealed Tuvok, his usual stoic demeanor tinged with an unfamiliar nervousness. Phylar looked up, surprised. "What is it, Father?" Phylar's eyes widened. She knew her father's work kept him off-world for extended periods, but this was different. This was a chance to truly connect, to bridge the gap that had always existed between them. "I would like that very much," she said softly. The next morning, as the sleek transport ship prepared for launch, Ymir addressed the assembled exchange students. "You carry with you the hopes of our people," he said. "Learn, grow, and show humanity the depth of Pakled potential." "The Pakleds arrive tomorrow," a gruff voice growled. "We can't let their alien influence spread any further." The speaker, a former associate of Frank Castillo, handed out data pads to his assembled team. "Our mission is clear," he continued, his eyes glinting with fanatical zeal. "We will sabotage this cultural exchange by any means necessary." The transport ship touched down on the outskirts of Harvard University's sprawling campus. Phylar and Tuvok stepped onto Earth soil, their eyes wide as they took in the bustling academic atmosphere. "Welcome to Harvard," a smiling administrator greeted them. "The Wilsons are eager to meet you." "I'm Sarah Wilson," the woman said warmly. "This is my husband, Tom, and our children, Derek and Emily." The first days were a whirlwind of new experiences. Phylar marveled at the intricate dance of human family life. The shared meals, the casual affection, the occasional disagreements that purposed through compromise and understanding. One evening, as Phylar helped Emily with her physics homework, a commotion erupted outside. Derek stumbled through the door, his face bruised and bleeding. "What happened?" Sarah gasped, rushing to her son. Without thinking, she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around the human boy. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe here. You don't have to be strong all the time." Derek's shoulders shook as he finally allowed himself to cry. The Wilsons watched in amazement as Phylar comforted their son with an intuitive grace they'd never seen in a Pakled before. Zachary Burke, now head of campus security, launched an investigation. His findings chilled him to the bone. "It's Castillo's old team," he reported to the university president. "They've gone rogue, determined to sabotage the exchange program." "We're terminating the immersion program," the dean announced. "For your own safety, all Pakled students must return home immediately." Phylar felt her heart sink. She turned to Tuvok, expecting resignation. Instead, she saw a fire in her father's eyes she'd never witnessed before. "No," Tuvok said firmly. "We will not abandon our host family or our mission here." As they left the dean's office, sirens blared across campus. Zachary's voice crackled over the emergency system. "All students, shelter in place. Armed suspects have breached the perimeter." Tuvok's traitor instincts kicked in. He grabbed Phylar's arm. "We need to get the Wilsons and get out of here. Now!" "Pack essentials," Tuvok ordered. I have a cargo shuttle hidden nearby. We're leaving Earth. Go! Tuvok yelled, laying down covering fire with his Pakled blaster. No! Filer cried out. She knelt beside the dying boy, her mind racing. Without hesitation, she placed her hands on Derek's temples, activating her neural interface. What is she doing? Sarah sobbed. As the shuttle broke atmosphere, Filer maintained her psychic link with Derek. Emergency beacons blared, summoning aid from the Pack-led science vessel, Trilera. Aboard the larger ship, Filer collapsed from exhaustion. She awoke hours later to find Derek in the medical bay, weak but alive. You saved me, he said, squeezing her hand. Filar smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she'd never experienced before. She looked up to see Tuvok watching them, an expression of immense pride on his face. What now? Emily asked, fear evident in her voice. Tuvok's eyes hardened with willpower. We find out who's behind this and we stop them. Our mission is too important to abandon. As the Trilera set course for a safe harbor, Filer knew their journey was just the beginning. But surrounded by her newfound family, both Pack-led and human, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Trilara's engines hummed as it cruised through the inky void of space. Filar stood at the viewport, her fingers pressed against the cold transparent steel. Behind her, the Wilson family huddled together, their faces a mixture of awe and apprehension. Tuvok's fingers flew across the control panel. Castillo's forces, he growled. They've found us. Sarah Wilson clutched her children close. What do we do now? Captain Vernara's voice crackled over the intercom. All hands, prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. Welcome to Jax's humble abode, Tuvok muttered. Silence stretched for long moments before the voice returned. Dock at Bay 3. And Tuvok? This better be good. The interior of Jax's outpost was a maze of dimly lit corridors and cramped chambers. Exotic alien species lurked in shadowy alcoves, eyeing the newcomers warily. Derek instinctively moved closer to Filer, his hand brushing against hers. They found Jax in a cavernous room filled with blinking consoles and holographic displays. The smuggler, a hulking figure with mottled green skin, glowered at Tuvok. You've got some nerve showing up here, Jax rumbled. Jax's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. Fine, follow me. Tom Wilson gasped. It's like something out of a movie. Stay close, Tuvok warned. This isn't a place for tourists. As they made their way through the throng, Derek's eyes widened at the sights. A tentacled alien haggled over glowing crystals. A group of masked figures huddled around a flickering hollow projector. In a dark corner, a creature that seemed made entirely of shadows whispered to a trembling human. Filer, Derek whispered, his voice tight. I've never seen anything like this. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the cavern. Jax spun around, her face contorted with rage. Chaos erupted as energy bolts sizzled through the air. Tom Wilson, his face set with commitment, grabbed a fallen weapon. Get to the ship, he shouted, returning fire. They fought their way back towards the docking bay. Jax's security forces engaged in a brutal firefight with the invaders. As they reached the launch chamber, a stray blast caught Jax in the chest. Jax managed a pained smile. Been a long time, little brother. Now go. Live. With a final push, they boarded the Trilera. As the ship rocketed away from the asteroid, Filar saw tears in Tuvok's eyes for the first time. The Trilera limped through space, its hull scarred from the firefight. On the bridge, Tuvok received a transmission from a familiar face. Emir, he said, relief evident in his voice. We're en route to the rendezvous point. As the ship cruised towards safety, Filer found Derek in the observation lounge. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions she was only beginning to understand. Filar took his hand, feeling the warm pulse of his emotions through their touch. As they gazed out at the stars, she knew their journey was a long way to go. In the days that followed, the Wilson family grappled with the whirlwind of events that had uprooted their lives. Derek spent hours in the medical bay, nanites repairing the last of his damaged tissue. Filer rarely left his side. One after adjusted Derek's regeneration field, he caught her hand. I never thanked you, he said softly, for saving my life. Filer felt a flutter in her chest, an unfamiliar warmth. "I couldn't let you die," she whispered. Meanwhile, Tuvok sequestered himself in his quarters, mourning Jax in private. Sarah Wilson found him there, staring at an old hollow image. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said, sitting beside him. As the Trilara cruised through space, Ymir called a meeting. The Wilsons and pack leads gathered in the ship's conference room, tension palpable in the air. Tom Wilson leaned forward. "What does this have to do with us?" Ymir's gaze swept the room. "I propose you join us. Your family, alongside Filer and Tuvok, could be living examples of human pack-led cooperation." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Sarah's face paled. "But Earth is our home," she protested. "It's also where Castillo's forces nearly killed us," Derek countered, his hand finding Filer's. The colony came into view as the Trilara broke atmosphere. Gleaming structures dotted the landscape, a stark contrast to the wild, untamed wilderness beyond. As they touched down, a crowd of pack leads gathered to greet them. "Welcome to New Calamore," a tall, silver-haired pack-led woman said. "I am Alara, colony administrator." The next weeks were a whirlwind of new experiences. Tuvok found himself living with Moloch, a widower, and his adopted daughter, Sula. The concept of adoption had been alien to pack-led society, and Tuvok watched with fascination as Moloch navigated the unfamiliar waters of fatherhood. Filer, drawn to Alara's wisdom, spent her days with the former admiral. Alara's eyes lit up as she described her hopes for the future. "I never knew I wanted grandchildren," she confided. "Now, I can't imagine a life without that joy." As the days passed, the colony began to feel like home. Derek and Filer's bond deepened, their shared trauma forging an unbreakable connection. They often walked the colony's perimeter, marveling at the new world around them. One evening, as they watched twin moons rise over the horizon, alarms blared across the settlement. Ymir's voice crackled over the comm system. Derek and Filer exchanged a look of purpose. As the colony mobilized around them, they knew the true test of their newfound unity was about to begin. The alarms blared, shattering the tranquility of New Calamore. Derek and Filer sprinted back to the colony's center, their hearts pounding. Ymir's voice crackled over the comm system, his tone urgent but controlled. Chaos erupted as pack leads and humans alike rushed to safety. Derek caught sight of his parents helping guide a group of elderly pack leads towards a fortified bunker. He moved to join them, but Filer grabbed his arm. "The shield generators," she said, her eyes wide. "They're not at full capacity." Derek nodded, understanding instantly. They raced to the control room, dodging panicked colonists. Inside, a team of pack-lead engineers worked frantically at blinking consoles. "Do it," the lead engineer said. For the next hour, Derek worked alongside the pack-leads, pushing the shield generators beyond their limits. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he coaxed every ounce of power from the colony's systems. Outside, the battle raged. Pack-led fighters engaged the mercenary ships, filling the sky with plasma fire and explosions. On the ground, colonists turned resistance fighters clashed with Castillo's ground forces. A blood-curdling scream cut through the din. Derek looked up to see Moloch, the pack-led widower, shielding his adopted daughter Sula from a hail of debris. The man's body went limp as he absorbed the impact, saving the young girl's life. "We can't hold them off forever," Filer said, her voice tight with emotion. "We need to evacuate." As if in response, Ymir's voice echoed through the colony once more. "All non-combatants to evacuation ships immediately. This is not a drill." Derek and Filer joined the stream of colonists rushing towards the spaceport. Tuvok appeared, herding a group of children onto a waiting transport. "Where's Alara?" Filer asked, scanning the crowd. Filer ran to the fallen elder, cradling her head. "Stay with me," she pleaded, activating her neural interface. They boarded the last transport, watching through tear-blurred eyes as New Calamore, their home for the past months, disappeared into the distance. The ship rendezvoused with other survivors at a predetermined fallback point. In the crowded hold of the largest vessel, Ymir addressed the shell-shocked colonists. His face was grim, but his voice never wavered. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tom Wilson stepped forward. "What's the plan?" We strike at the heart of Castillo's operation. A small team will board that ship and end this threat once and for all. The survivors of New Calamur materialized from jump space, their ragtag fleet emerging in the shadow of a massive orbital structure. Ymir's voice crackled over the comms. "Welcome to the Phoenix Yards, our last bastion." As the ships docked, Derek marveled at the sprawling facility. Skeletal frames of half-built vessels hung suspended in vacuum, while swarms of maintenance drones flitted between them like fireflies. "The Trillion Cluster," a grizzled, pack-led admiral explained, pointing to a series of red markers. "Castillo's remaining strongholds." Ymir stepped forward, his face etched with lines of fatigue. "We've suffered a grievous blow, but we are not defeated. New Calamur's spirit lives on in each of us." He activated another holoscreen, revealing schematics for a device Derek didn't recognize. "Our weapon against hate itself," Ymir declared, "a psycho-empathic transmitter." Tuvok's eyes widened. "You mean to broadcast directly into their neural implants?" As the meeting dispersed, Derek found Filer staring out a viewport. Her eyes were distant, unfocused. "What did you see?" he asked softly. Filer blinked, turning to face him. "Doubt," she whispered. "Fear. Even in Castillo's most loyal soldiers, there are cracks in their grit. We can reach them." Weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Derek threw himself into repurposing communications arrays, while Filar worked tirelessly to refine the empathic transmission protocols. The first tests were conducted on willing pack-led subjects, fine-tuning the balance of emotional resonance. Then came the moment of truth. Ymir gave the order, and the Phoenix Yards hummed with energy as the psycho-empathic wave pulsed outward. At first, there was nothing but static on the monitoring stations. Then a single blip, a mercenary frigate going dark. Another followed, and another. The floodgates opened. Distress calls flooded in from confused soldiers, their conditioning shattered by the empathic assault. Filar coordinated triage teams, working to stabilize the most psychologically fragile cases. "You think you can break us with your mind games?" she snarled. "We'll hunt you to the ends of the galaxy." Days later, as Derek and Filer shared a rare moment of quiet in the botanical gardens, alarms blared throughout the station. They raced to the command center, where Tom Wilson was already hunched over a tactical display. Filer gasped, but before she could speak, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "This is Tuvok. We're under heavy fire but holding. Request immediate extraction." As preparations for evacuation kicked into high gear, long-range sensors lit up with multiple contacts. Valora's Zealot fleet had found them. "All hands to battle stations," Ymir's voice boomed throughout the station. "This is where we make our stand." Derek raced to his post, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. As Filer's voice echoed in his mind, filling him with drive, he knew that the fate of two species hung in the balance. The Sentinel array trembled under the barrage of Valora's Zealot fleet. Derek's fingers flew across his console, rerouting power to failing shield generators as explosions rocked the station. "Portside defenses are down!" Tuvok shouted over the din. Filar's voice crackled through Derek's neural interface. "We can't hold them off much longer." The air thrummed with energy as the massive structure's systems engaged. Derek felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as space-time warped around them. In a blinding flash, the Sentinel array and its ragtag fleet of defenders vanished from the battlefield. They emerged in a swirling sea of plasma and stellar debris. The Zarin Nebula stretched in every direction, its volatile storms concealing them from prying eyes. "Status report," Ymir commanded. "Multiple hull breaches," Tom Wilson responded. "Life support at 60% capacity, but we're alive." As the adrenaline faded, Derek took in the battered state of their forces. Scorched ships limped alongside the array, their crews shell-shocked but grateful for survival. Jax's gruff voice cut through the comms. "My old smuggling charts show an abandoned outpost nearby. It's our best bet for repairs and resupply." Days blurred together as they worked to restore the ancient pack-led facility. Derek found himself elbow-deep in corroded circuitry, coaxing long-dormant systems back to life. the outpost gradually transformed from a derelict ruin into a bustling sanctuary. In a makeshift classroom, Filer addressed a group of wide-eyed Pakled and human children. "Today, we'll explore how our differences make us stronger," she began, her gentle voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Tuvok observed from the doorway, a rare smile on his face. "You have a gift for this," he remarked as the class dispersed. Filar nodded. "It's more than just teaching. We're laying the foundation for a new society." Their moment of peace was shattered by raised voices echoing from the command center. Derek and Filer rushed to investigate, finding General Lorga and Emir locked in heated debate. "We can't hide forever," Lorga growled, gesturing at a holographic star map. "Valora's forces are regrouping. We must strike now before they can mount another assault." Before Lorga could retort, proximity alarms blared throughout the outpost. A single ship had penetrated the nebula's defenses. "It's Valora," Tuvok reported, his face ashen. "How did she find us so quickly?" "No, this ends now without further bloodshed." He turned to Filer. "Are you ready?" She nodded, understanding passing between them. As Valora's ship docked, Emir and Filar stood waiting in the airlock. Derek watched from a nearby security station, his heart pounding. "Your reign of deception ends here, traitor," she snarled at Emir. Emir spread his hands unarmed. "There is another way, Valora. Let us show you." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across the captain's face. Then her features hardened. She raised her weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. Filar's eyes locked onto Valora's, a telepathic bridge forming between them. The captain staggered, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions and memories. "Impossible," Valora gasped. "What are you?" Derek watched in amazement as Filar's neural interface glowed, channeling the collective empathy of their makeshift family. Valora's gun clattered to the floor as she clutched her head, fighting against the torrent of unfamiliar sensations. But even as hope bloomed, Derek saw a chilling change come over the mercenary captain. Her eyes snapped open, now filled with an inhuman tenacity. With lightning speed, she lunged for Emir. The two women locked in mental combat, their physical forms frozen as an unseen battle raged within their minds. Derek's hand hovered over the security override, torn between intervening and trusting in Filar's abilities. In that moment of uncertainty, the fate of their fledgling alliance hung in the balance. Balance. Derek's finger hovered over the security override, his breath caught in his throat. Suddenly, Filar's eyes flashed with brilliant light. Valora stumbled backward, her face contorted in shock. In that instant, Filar raised her hand, unleashing a wave of empathic energy that washed over Valora and her troops. The mercenaries crumpled to the ground, unconscious. "Containment teams, move in!" Emir barked into his comm. Security personnel swarmed the airlock, securing the incapacitated soldiers. Filar sagged against the wall, exhausted. Derek rushed to her side, supporting her weight. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. She nodded weakly. "It's done, but this is only temporary." Emir's voice cut through the chaos. "Lock down the outpost. I'm calling an emergency council meeting." Hours later, Derek found himself in a crowded conference room. The air crackled with tension as voices rose in heated debate. General Lorga hit his fist on the table. "They're too dangerous to keep alive. We should execute them all and be done with it." "And become the very monsters we're fighting against?" Tuvok countered, his normally calm demeanor giving way to frustration. Emir raised his hands for silence. "We have another option." He nodded to Filar, who activated a holographic display of intricate neural pathways. Murmurs of uncertainty rippled through the room. Derek watched as doubt and hope warred on the faces around him. After agonizing deliberation, a decision was reached. Filar would attempt to break through Valora's mental conditioning. In a sterile medbay, Valora lay strapped to a biobed, neural interfaces glowing at her temples. Filar stood beside her, eyes closed in concentration. Filar's consciousness plunged into the maelstrom of Valora's psyche. Fragments of memory assaulted her. Childhood trauma, military indoctrination, the seeds of fanaticism taking root. In the physical world, Valora's body convulsed. Alarms blared as her vital signs spiked. Phylar pushed deeper, her own neural implants pulsing with effort. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the barriers crumbled. Valora's eyes flew open, filled with tears and wonder. What have I done?" she choked out. Phylar collapsed, caught by Derek's waiting arms. She managed a weary smile. It worked. Word of Valora's transformation spread quickly. Many of her troops, shaken by their leader's change of heart, surrendered willingly to the recalibration process. But a hardline faction, led by the ruthless Colonel Marska, seized a cloaked warship and vanished into the nebula. Tuvok, his expression resolute. "I'll lead the assault force." As preparations for the two-pronged operation kicked into high gear, Derek found Phylar in the medbay, monitoring Valora's recovery. Phylar's eyes were distant, processing a lifetime of pain and misconceptions. But there's hope there now. She turned to Derek, perseverance etched on her features. "We have to finish this for all our sakes." As the civilian evacuation began and Tuvok's strike team prepared to launch, Derek gripped Phylar's hand tightly. The final battle for their future was about to begin. Derek found himself in a classroom, surrounded by a sea of eager young faces. Pakalid and human children sat side by side, their attention fixed on Phylar as she guided them through an empathic exercise. Derek watched in amazement as the children's neural interfaces pulsed with soft light. A young Pakalid girl gasped, her eyes wide. "I can feel Timmy's excitement about his new pet." Phylar beamed. "Excellent, Kira. That's exactly what we're aiming for." As the class concluded, Derek approached Phylar. "It's incredible to see how far we've come," he said, gesturing to the departing students. Phylar nodded, her expression a mix of pride and persistence. "This is just the beginning. We're laying the groundwork for a completely new Pac-led society." In the command center, Ymir paced before a holographic display of New Kalimor II. The barren moon's surface was dotted with green patches, the first signs of their terraforming efforts. Murmurs of agreement and concern rippled through the room. Ymir continued, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. "That's why I'm proposing a bold new initiative. Phylar, Tuvok, I want you to return to Earth as our emissaries." Phylar leaned forward, intrigued. "What exactly did you have in mind?" Ymir's expression was resolute. "An unprecedented cultural exchange. Pac-led families living among humans, sharing our newfound wisdom while learning from their ancient traditions." "I can vouch for the power of this approach," Valora said. "My own perspective was completely reshaped by experiencing genuine empathy and understanding. If we can extend that opportunity to others, it could change everything." As the council deliberated, Derek's mind raced with possibilities. He thought of his own family back on Earth, of the potential for true interspecies harmony. The path ahead was uncertain, but filled with promise. Days later, Derek stood in the hangar bay, watching as Phylar and Tuvok made final preparations for their journey to Earth. The sleek diplomatic shuttle hummed with energy, its systems primed for the long voyage. Phylar smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "Your work here is too important, Derek. Besides, we need you to keep an eye on things while we're gone." As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Derek stepped back. He watched as the vessel rose gracefully into the sky, carrying his friends in the future of human Pac-led relations into the star-studded expanse beyond. Months passed, marked by the gradual greening of New Kalimor II's surface. Then, one ordinary day, alarms blared throughout the colony. But these were not warnings of attack. They heralded an incoming transmission. Derek raced to the command center, his heart pounding. On the main view screen, Phylar and Tuvok's faces appeared, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and elation. "We've done it," Phylar announced, her voice crackling with static but filled with joy. "The Earth governments have agreed to our proposal. The first Pac-led families will be arriving on Earth within the month." A cheer went up from the gathered colonists. Derek felt a swell of emotion as he realized the magnitude of this moment. They stood on the brink of a new era, one where the bonds of family might just be strong enough to bridge the vast distances between worlds. Gorva's face split into a tentative smile. "We are grateful for your hospitality," he said carefully. the words still feeling strange on his tongue. Across the country in San Francisco, Parva unpacked her meager belongings in Frank and Michael's spare room. The young Pakled scientist's eyes darted around, taking in the eclectic decor. "So you two are life partners?" Parva asked hesitantly. Frank smiled warmly. "We're looking forward to learning from you too, Parva." But not all integration efforts went smoothly. In Milwaukee, a brick shattered the Hansen family's living room window, narrowly missing elderly Theldra. Red spray paint marred the house's exterior. "Aliens! Go home!" On New Calimore 2, alarms blared through the colony. Emir's voice crackled over the intercom. "All units to battle stations. Weldick's cell has acquired stolen tech. Valora, prepare your team for immediate deployment." Valora sprinted to the armory, her mind racing. How had Weldick amassed such firepower under their noses? She locked eyes with her protege, Sariv, as they geared up. Their shuttle screamed towards Weldick's moon base. As they approached, a hail of energy bolts erupted from concealed emplacements. Valora's pilot barely managed to land in a sheltered ravine. "Ambush!" Valora shouted as her team scrambled for cover. Weldick's forces had the high ground, raining down fire from multiple angles. Sarev's neural interface pulsed rapidly as she assessed the situation. "Commander, I can reach their control center," she said, pointing to a narrow crevice in the rock face. As Sarev darted towards the base, alarms screamed across New Calimore. Derek watched in horror as swarms of bioweapon drones descended on the colony. Inside the moon base, Sarev crawled through maintenance ducts, her heart pounding. She emerged into a dimly lit chamber, face to face with Weldick himself. The extremist leader sneered. "Too late, little one." He pressed a final key, transmitting a coded burst of data. Sariv lunged, tackling Weldick to the ground. Their neural interfaces flared as she forced a mental connection, flooding his mind with the truth of her experiences. Weldick's followers, witnessing the exchange, lowered their weapons in confusion. The fight drained from their faces as understanding dawned. But even as Weldick was subdued, the damage was done. On Earth, Phylar's comm device chirped urgently. Emir's holographic form appeared, his expression grave. Phylar's blood ran cold as she realized the magnitude of the threat. The dream of integration now balanced on a knife's edge. Phylar's face drained of color as Emir's hologram faded. She spun towards the O'Leary family, her voice urgent. "We need to leave. Now!" "No time to explain," Phylar said, herding them toward the door. "Grab essentials and get to the shuttle." They barely made it outside when a deafening roar split the air. The O'Leary home erupted in a blinding flash of blue-white plasma. The shock wave knocked them off their feet, showering them with debris. Patrick shielded his sons with his body, ears ringing. "Oh God," he whispered, staring at the smoldering crater where their house had stood moments before. Across the continent, Parva's neural interface flared with warning signals. She lunged across the room, tackling Frank and Michael to the floor as their apartment walls disintegrated around them. Concrete and steel rained down, Parva's body a living shield over the stunned couple. In the command center on New Calimore 2, Derek watched in horror as red dots flashed across the global map. Each pinpoint represented another attack on an integration household. The body count climbed mercilessly. 212 confirmed strikes, a technician reported, voice hollow. Casualties mounting rapidly. The next weeks passed in a blur of frantic activity. Valora led her commando teams on lightning raids across a dozen systems, hunting Weldick's operatives. They struck at hidden bases and secret laboratories, neutralizing bomb makers and enforcers. In a shadowy cantina on Rigel IV, Valora cornered a sneering pack-led enforcer. "Where's Weldick?" she demanded, neural interface pulsing as she probed his defenses. The enforcer spat. "You'll never find him. Our cause is just. The weak will be purged." Valora's expression hardened. She struck with blinding speed, incapacitating the fanatic. As her team secured the prisoner, her comm device chirped. "Commander!" Emir's voice crackled. "Return to New Calimore immediately. It's time." The memorial service was a somber affair. Hundreds gathered in the colony's central plaza, humans and pack leads alike. Holograms flickered, displaying faces of the fallen. Each name struck like a hammer blow. In the crowd, Lauren O'Leary clutched her sons close, tears streaming down her face. Nearby, Parva supported a bandaged Frank, all three bearing the haunted look of survivors. As Tuvok's oration concluded, Ymir took the stage. The colony's leader looked older, the weight of recent events evident in the set of his shoulders, but his voice rang out, clear and resolute. "We have suffered a grievous blow," Ymir said, "but we will not be cowed by terror. Even now, our armada moves to protect remaining integration communities, and with the full backing of the Human World Council, we will expand our efforts tenfold." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ymir raised his hands. "We will meet hatred with understanding. We will counter violence with compassion, and together we will forge a future brighter than any our peoples have known before." As the memorial service concluded, a palpable shift rippled through the gathered crowd. Ymir's words had kindled a spark, igniting a fierce dedication in the faces of humans and Pakleds alike. On the frontier world of Theta Eridani, Tuvok and Phylar stepped off their transport into the dusty main street of the Calderan mining settlement. The air hung heavy with the acrid scent of ore refineries and the distant rumble of extraction equipment. One afternoon, she sat with young Mira Aldra, guiding the girl through a complex mathematics problem. Mira's face scrunched in frustration. Phylar placed a gentle hand on Mira's shoulder. "Intelligence isn't fixed, Mira. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes." Mira looked up, hope dawning in her eyes. "Really?" Meanwhile, Tuvok's expertise in Pakled technology found an unexpected application in the mines. He developed a new sensor array that could detect instabilities in the rock face, preventing several near-catastrophic cave-ins. After one particularly close call, Bren Aldera, Gran's eldest son, clapped Tuvok on the back. "You saved a lot of lives today," he said gruffly. "Maybe you aliens aren't so bad after all." 6 months into their stay, Gran Aldera summoned Tuvok to her private quarters. The matriarch's usually stern demeanor had softened. "Tuvok," she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "my great-granddaughter will be born soon. I'd like you to stand as her surrogate grandparent." Tuvok's neural interface flickered with surprise and deep emotion. "I would be honored, Gran Aldera." On New Calamore 2, Derek found himself fielding increasingly pointed questions from the Earthworld Council. "What are the long-term implications?" demanded Counselor Zhang. "Are we creating a new species that will supplant both humans and Paklids?" Before Derek could respond, alarms blared through the command center. A priority transmission from Theta Eridani cut through the chaos. "Emergency!" Phylar's voice crackled, thick with smoke and static. "Massive explosion in the deep mines. Pyroclasts ignited. Heavy casualties. Send help immediately." Derek's blood ran cold as he realized the integration initiative now faced its greatest test yet. The response to this disaster would shape the future of human-Pakled relations for generations to come. As the dust settled on Theta Eridani, the true cost of the mining disaster became clear. Tuvok and Phylar worked tirelessly alongside the Aldera clan, pulling survivors from the rubble and tending to the injured. The shared tragedy forged bonds deeper than anyone had anticipated. Weeks later, as Tuvok cradled Gran Aldera's newborn great-granddaughter, an urgent message from Ymir interrupted the moment of peace. "Return to New Calamore immediately." The colony leader's hologram flickered. "We have a situation." Back on New Calamore 2, Derek paced the command center, his face etched with concern. As Tuvok and Phylar entered, he gestured to a holographic display filled with data streams and genetic sequences. "We're seeing unprecedented cognitive development in human Pakled hybrid children," Derek explained, bringing up images of infants with eerily focused gazes. "On Centauri Prime, a 9-month-old named Joro has mastered multi-dimensional calculus." Phylar's neural interface pulsed rapidly as she processed the information. "That's impossible." "There's more," Derek continued, switching to footage of a toddler sitting in a meditative pose, surrounded by swirling energy patterns. "This is Zyma. She's achieved spontaneous quantum coherence trance states." Derek brought up a new hologram, showing a cluster of nondescript buildings on a barren world. We've traced the source to undocumented in vitro clinics on Alberon 5. A joint human Pakled military task force is en route to investigate. Days later, on the frontier world of Alberon 5, Valora led her team through the sterile corridors of an abandoned clinic. The air hung heavy with the acrid smell of hastily erased data and destroyed equipment. "They knew we were coming," Sarah muttered, her neural interface scanning for any remaining digital traces. In a back room, they found their first solid lead. A partially corrupted hollow recording flickered to life, revealing the face of a gaunt Pakled with wild eyes. A chill ran down Valora's spine as Emir continued. "They're not just enhancing intellect, they're weaponizing these children." Back on New Calimore 2, the command center erupted into frenzied activity as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Frank Castillo, his mercenary days behind him, found himself reactivated to lead a specialized hunting team. "We're looking for a needle in a cosmic haystack," Frank growled, studying star charts of the Drexel Nebula. Finally, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A Pakled smuggler, caught in a routine cargo inspection, spilled the coordinates of a derelict shipyard in exchange for leniency. As Valora's shuttle approached the massive, decaying structure, her team's neural interfaces buzzed with nervous energy. They docked, entering the shipyard's cavernous holds with weapons drawn. The first rooms they encountered were lined with stagnant growth vats, each containing the tiny, lifeless form of a hybrid clone. Valora swallowed hard, forcing down a wave of nausea. Deeper in the complex, they found Dr. Krill hunched over a control panel. The geneticist spun to face them, his eyes wild beneath his hood. "You're too late," Krill sneered, his finger hovering over a pulsing red button. "The future of our species cannot be stopped." He slammed his hand down, and alarms blared throughout the shipyard. Valora's neural interface screamed warnings as the structure began to shake apart around them. The transformed Krill lashed out with a wave of pure psionic force, sending Valora's squad flying. Only Frank's hardened mercenaries managed to keep their footing, returning fire with specialized disruptor weapons. As the shipyard disintegrated around them, Valora saw her team fall one by one to Krill's onslaught. In a moment of desperate clarity, she reached deep into her Pakled ancestry, channeling neural energy into a searing bolt of blue-white force. The blast struck Krill square in the chest, disrupting the chaotic energy swirling through his mutated form. With a howl of agony, the once brilliant geneticist crumpled to the ground, reverting to a withered husk. Valora stumbled to her feet, surveying the carnage around her. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the implications of Krill's work left a cold knot of dread in her stomach. As her remaining team members regrouped, she opened a comm channel to New Calimore 2. "Krill is down," she reported, her voice hoarse. "But Weldick is still out there, and now we know what he's capable of." "We've opened Pandora's box," Emir said softly. "The question now is whether we can close it before it's too late." Emir's hologram flickered as he addressed the gathered leaders on New Calimore 2. "We stand at a crossroads," he said, his voice heavy. "Dr. Krill's experiments have revealed both the incredible potential and devastating risks of human Pakled hybridization." Filer stepped forward, her neural interface pulsing with urgency. "We must act decisively. I propose accelerating our own controlled hybridization program to create defenders capable of countering these threats." The room erupted in heated debate. Derek banged his hand on the table. "Are we no better than Krill if we weaponize our own people?" In a sterile white room deep within a secure facility, Frank Castillo stood before a group of recruits. His weathered face bore the scars of countless battles, both physical and moral. "You've all volunteered for something unprecedented," he said, pacing before them. "You'll be pushed beyond what you thought possible. Some of you may not survive, but if we succeed, you'll be the vanguard protecting humanity and our Pakled allies." Alia Veers, barely out of her teens, raised her hand. "Sir, when do we begin?" Frank's grim expression softened slightly. "Right now, kid." In a glass-walled observation room, Filer and Tuvok monitored the process. "Alia's results are extraordinary," Tuvok noted, gesturing to a holographic display of the young woman's neural activity. Filar nodded, her interface pulsing with excitement. Her mind is adapting to the Pac-led engrams at an unprecedented rate. It's as if she was born for this. In the training arena, Lucas Redcrow grappled with a combat drone, his movements becoming increasingly fluid and precise. Suddenly, he dodged an attack before the drone had even initiated it. "Did you see that?" Filer exclaimed. "He's developing precognitive abilities." Not all transformations went smoothly. Mikhail Ivanov screamed in agony as his body rejected the Pac-led alterations. His flesh rippled and bulged, bones cracking as they reshaped themselves. "I'm sorry, old friend," Frank whispered, squeezing the trigger. During a combat simulation, time itself appeared to slow around her. She weaved through a hail of energy blasts, each movement precise and deliberate. "Chronokinesis," Tuvok breathed, watching the playback. "She's manipulating temporal fields on a localized level." As Crucible's first successful hybrids neared completion of their training, reports of increased extremist activity flooded in. Weldik's forces were mobilizing, clearly aware of the project's existence. Frank gathered his team, their eyes now bearing the telltale glow of successful hybridization. "This is it, people. Everything we've worked for comes down to what happens next. Weldik's planning something big, and we're the only ones who can stop him." In the heart of the facility, Lucas Redcrow felt a surge of power coursing through his newly altered cells. The metamaterial infusion had changed him on a fundamental level, granting him abilities he was only beginning to comprehend. Beside him, Aliyah Veers's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she tapped into her newfound chronopsionic powers. "Lucas, we need to—" Aliyah's words were cut short by a blinding flash and deafening boom. The air shimmered as suicide bombers materialized in the corridor, their bodies already dissolving into clouds of sickly green vapor. "Mutagenic ordnance!" Lucas shouted, instinctively reaching out with his mind. To his amazement, he felt the molecular structure of the deadly mist responding to his will. He focused, shaping the toxic cloud into a protective barrier around himself and Aliyah. But they were too late to save everyone. Screams of agony filled the air as the flesh-sculpting plague consumed their fellow candidates. Lucas watched in horror as a young woman's body twisted and contorted, her features melting into an unrecognizable mass. In the command center, Tuvok staggered as the mutagenic wave washed over him. His stoic facade crumbled as his body began to warp and shift. With his last moments of clarity, he reached out psionically to Filar, channeling his remaining life force into her. "Child," Filar rasped, her form already beginning to lose cohesion. "Take what I am." As Filar's body succumbed to the plague, Aliyah's perception of time and space expanded exponentially. She saw the mutagens spread as a four-dimensional tapestry, each thread a potential future. With newfound mastery, she began to manipulate the temporal flows, creating pockets of reverse time to halt the plague's advance. Meanwhile, Lucas delved deeper into his biokinetic abilities. He reached out to the writhing masses of flesh that had once been his fellow candidates, feeling the chaotic dance of their altered DNA. With fierce dedication, he began to reshape and stabilize the mutations, transforming the victims into controllable bioconstructed drones. Frank Castillo, his face streaked with blood and his left arm hanging uselessly at his side, rallied what remained of his hybrid soldiers. "We've got Weldik's forces breaching the east wing," he barked. "Lucas, take your constructs and hold that line. Aliyah, we need you to clear a path to the weapons lab. That's where this horror originated, and that's where we end it." As she began to systematically destroy the mutagenic arsenal, a figure emerged from the shadows. Weldik himself, his eyes gleaming with fanatical zeal, raised a weapon crackling with unstable energy. "You cannot stop evolution," he snarled, firing a beam of coruscating light at Aliyah. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as Aliyah's enhanced perceptions kicked in. She saw the beam inching towards her, the air around it warping with temporal distortions. With a thought, she opened a micro-wormhole, redirecting the blast back at its source. Weldik howled as his own weapon's energy engulfed him, his body twisting and mutating uncontrollably. Aliyah turned away from the grotesque sight, focusing on completing her mission. As the last of the mutagenic containers detonated in a carefully controlled temporal bubble, Aliyah felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The full weight of Filer's transferred consciousness pressed down on her mind, threatening to fracture her sense of self. She staggered back to the central hub, where Frank and Lucas were assessing the aftermath of their Pyrrhic victory. The once bustling facility was now a tomb, filled with the moans of the dying and hideously transformed. Frank's face, now barely recognizable beneath the creeping mutations, twisted with anguish as he looked at the few survivors. We can't let them suffer like this," he growled, his voice distorted by his changing vocal cords. Lucas nodded grimly, understanding the unspoken order. He reached out with his biokinetic senses, preparing to grant a merciful end to those beyond saving. Alia's chronosenses tingled, warning her of approaching quantum fluctuations. "We're not done," she said, her voice carrying the weight of Filer's centuries of experience. "Emir's rapid response team is incoming. We need to secure the facility and prepare for quarantine protocols." As Alia, Lucas, and Frank secured the devastated Crucible facility, Emir's quantum-encrypted transmission crackled through their neural interfaces. The holographic avatar of the pack-led leader materialized before them, his expression grave. Frank, his features still warping from the mutagenic assault, struggled to process the information. "Sir, with all due respect, we're in no condition to—" Alia stepped forward, her mind racing with the combined knowledge of Filer and her own enhanced cognitive abilities. "The integration program. It's brilliant," she breathed, seeing the potential unfold in her mind's eye. As the program launched, Alia found herself assigned to monitor multiple integration sites simultaneously. Her chrono-psionic abilities allowed her to phase between locations, observing key moments in real time. In a cozy Massachusetts home, she watched as Elder Waxla awkwardly attempted to embrace her human hosts, Hank and Emmy. The teenager's patience was evident as she guided Waxla's arms into a proper hug, a small smile playing on her lips. Thousands of miles away in Sydney, Alia materialized just in time to see celebrated academic Kirsten introducing Miris's children to the wonders of a tidal pool. The young Packled's eyes widened with fascination as they touched a sea anemone for the first time, their neural interfaces pulsing with new sensory input. "It's not about converting them," Alia heard Bob explain gently to his congregation. "It's about showing them the power of unconditional love." As months passed, Alia witnessed remarkable transformations. Waxla began to soften, her rigid posture relaxing as she learned to play board games with Emmy. Miris and his wife Grevna started incorporating human lullabies into their nightly routines, their infant progeny responding with increased neural activity. Even Olgor, initially resistant to change, found himself moved by Pastor Bob's unwavering kindness. Alia watched as the pack-led father hesitantly placed a hand on Pravis's shoulder during a Sunday picnic, an unprecedented display of physical affection. 10, 9, 8. Miris clutched his children close, their small hands intertwined with Kirsten's. 7, 6, 5. 1. As the ball dropped and fireworks erupted overhead, a wave of pure, unadulterated love swept through the crowd. Alia gasped as she felt the psychic outpouring, more powerful than anything she had experienced since her transformation. Waxla threw her arms around Hank and Emmy, tears streaming down her face. "My family," she sobbed. The words carrying the weight of a lifetime of emotional repression finally shattered. As the fireworks continued to paint the sky, Alia's neural interface chimed with an incoming transmission from Emir. His holographic form appeared before her, his eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and hope. As the euphoria of New Year's Eve faded, Emir wasted no time in capitalizing on the integration's success. Within weeks, he unveiled the Pack-led Familial Immersion Exchange Initiative, a bold plan to relocate entire alien kindred clans to Earth. "Never thought I'd see the day," muttered Hank Redhorse, a grizzled rancher, as he passed Alia a steaming mug of coffee. "Aliens and humans, building a community together." As months passed, Alia found herself crisscrossing the globe, monitoring the rapid expansion of Pack-led enclaves. In Johannesburg, she witnessed trillion tutors revolutionizing local schools with their multidimensional teaching techniques. Bangkok's bustling markets now featured Pack-led healers, their biosynthetic remedies curing ailments that had long plagued humanity. But it was on the shores of Lake Titicaca where Aaliyah truly grasped the magnitude of the changes taking place. As she stepped onto one of the floating reed islands, she saw a young Pakled, barely out of his larval stage, conversing fluently in Aymara with an elderly weaver. "He's only been here 3 weeks," explained Juanita, the island's matriarch, her eyes twinkling with pride. "But already he understands our ways better than some of my own grandchildren." As night fell, Aaliyah sat cross-legged on the gently bobbing island, surrounded by a circle of human and Pakaled faces, illuminated by flickering torchlight. The air thrummed with the sound of panpipes and alien harmonics, as both species joined in an improvised melody that seemed to bridge the gap between their worlds. Yet even as she basked in the warmth of this cultural fusion, Aaliyah's neural interface pulsed with an urgent transmission from Ymir. His holographic form materialized before her, his expression grave. Aaliyah's mind raced, calculating probabilities and potential countermeasures. "We need to bolster our defenses without causing panic," she said. "I'll coordinate with Frank and Lucas to—" She was cut off by another incoming transmission, this one from Mars Colony. Dr. Fia Lewis's face appeared, flushed with excitement and fear. "Aaliyah, it's happening," she gasped. "The hybrid, Filer's consciousness. It's destabilizing the lab." Before Aaliyah could respond, she felt a massive surge of energy rippling through space-time. With barely a thought, she phased across the vast distance, materializing in the chaos of Fia's Martian bunker. Aaliyah reached out with her chronopsionic abilities, creating a bubble of localized time dilation around Fia. "Push!" she commanded, her voice echoing with the weight of multiple time streams. "Push now!" With a final, reality-warping scream, Fia gave birth. The lab plunged into darkness, then silence. As emergency lights flickered on, Aaliyah saw Fia cradling a tiny, perfectly formed human infant. But her enhanced perception revealed something more. An aura vibrating with an impossible octarine frequency. "Omega," Fia whispered, her eyes wide with wonder and exhaustion. "The abomination lives. Prepare the strike teams. The Antichrist Omega must not be allowed to grow into her power." Aaliyah looked down at the sleeping infant, marveling at the cosmic potential contained within such a fragile form. She knew that the true battle for the future of both species had only just begun. The calm of the Martian lab shattered as alarms blared through the complex. Aaliyah's neural interface crackled with urgent transmissions, a cacophony of panic and warning. "Orbital strike imminent," Fia's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to move, now." Aaliyah scooped up the infant Omega, cradling her against her chest as she sprinted after Fia. The ground beneath them trembled, dust raining from the ceiling as the first impact struck nearby. They burst out of the habitat into the rusty Martian landscape. The sky above them blazed with fire as Lejour's mercenaries rained destruction upon the colony. "This way!" Fia shouted, leading them towards a small rover. They piled in, Aaliyah still clutching Omega tightly. As Fia gunned the engine, Aaliyah's mind raced. Her chronopsionic abilities flared, giving her glimpses of multiple potential futures branching out before them. Most ended in fire and death. Fia nodded grimly, her eyes fixed on the treacherous path ahead. "There's an emergency shuttle at Outpost Sigma. If we can reach it—" Her words were cut off as a blast rocked the rover, nearly tipping it over. Aaliyah's time sense flared, allowing her to stabilize the vehicle with a burst of telekinetic energy. "They've found us!" she hissed. Through the swirling dust, dark shapes emerged, sleek attack skimmers piloted by Lejour's shock troopers. Energy weapons lanced out, scorching the Martian soil around them. Fia swerved erratically, using the terrain for cover as best she could. Aaliyah reached out with her mind, creating localized time distortions to deflect the incoming fire. As they crested a ridge, Outpost Sigma came into view, a squat, fortified structure hunched against the Martian wind. But between them and safety, a line of mercenary troops had formed a blockade. "Hold on," Fia growled, accelerating directly towards the enemy line. They screeched to a halt at the outpost's airlock. Fia leapt out, frantically inputting access codes. Aaliyah followed, shielding Omega as best she could from the howling Martian wind. They sealed themselves inside, Fia already racing towards the shuttle bay. Alarms blared throughout the outpost as Lazor's forces began breaching the outer defenses. The shuttle loomed before them, a promise of escape. But as they approached, a searing pain lanced through Alia's skull. Her neural interface went haywire, overwhelmed by a massive influx of data. She stumbled, nearly dropping Omega. Through the haze of agony, she saw Fia's face contort in shock and fear. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a flickering hologram materializing in the shuttle bay, the stern visage of Ymir, his eyes blazing with purpose. "Hold on," his voice echoed, distorted and distant. "Help is coming." Then Alia's world went black, and she knew no more. "Is secure," Ymir interrupted, gesturing to a shimmering cube of energy floating in the center of the room. Within it, Alia could just make out the infant's sleeping form, suspended in a gossamer web of light. "For now," Ymir nodded, "it's not a permanent solution, but it buys us time to find a way to stabilize her powers." The images shifted, showing a pack-led spiritual leader addressing a rapt congregation in a human church. Another scene depicted an alien empath working with human patients, their faces transforming from anguish to serenity. "It's incredible," Alia breathed. Ymir's expression darkened. "But not everyone sees it that way. The Confederated Worlds Alliance views us as a threat. They've already made one attempt on my life." He brought up footage of a diplomatic summit on New Valencia. Alia watched in horror as an assassin's energy blast lanced towards Ymir, only to be intercepted by a human host who threw himself into its path. Ymir nodded, his eyes blazing with willpower. "We won't. I'm assembling a team for a covert strike against the Alliance extremists. We've tracked them to Phalon." Alia looked up at Ymir, seeing the weight of countless decisions in his eyes. She knew that whatever came next would change the course of both their species forever. "We have work to do," she said simply. Ymir nodded, and together they stepped through a shimmering portal, leaving Omega's stasis cube floating silently behind them. "Welcome," Fia said, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Project Transcendence stands ready." But as Alia stepped forward to examine the apparatus, alarms blared, screens flashed urgent warnings as the equipment sparked and sputtered. "Containment breach!" a technician shouted. A blinding flash erupted from the platform. When Alia's vision cleared, she saw Fia sprawled on the floor unmoving. The air crackled with residual energy. "No," Ymir whispered, his holographic form flickering with distress. "Ian." He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Teresa," he choked out. We were so close." They crowded around a holographic display showing an uncharted region of space. A pulsing signal emanated from its center. "The Phoenix Void," Ymir answered, studying the readouts. "On an uncharted protoplanet." "We have to go," Ian insisted. "If there's any chance of understanding what happened to Teresa—" Ymir hesitated, then nodded. "Assemble an expedition team. But Ian, the risks—" "I don't care," Ian cut him off. "I'm going." Weeks later, their ship emerged from hyperspace into a cosmic maelstrom. Vast clouds of interstellar gas swirled and coalesced at impossible speeds, igniting into newborn stars before their eyes. "It's beautiful," Fia breathed, recovered enough to join the mission. "And terrifying." Fia's eyes widened. "It's Omega. She's creating, shaping reality itself." "Lazor!" Alia hissed. They plummeted towards the protoplanet's surface, trailing fire and debris. Impact threw them about the cabin. When the dust settled, Alia found herself separated from the others, the ship torn in two. A stray energy blast caught Fia, sending her sprawling. Alia reached out with her abilities, trying to shield her friend. But something interfered. The very fabric of space-time seemed to ripple and twist. "No!" Alia screamed, fighting to reach her. But Ian was there first, kneeling beside Fia's prone form. She saw him manipulate the stasis module, a look of unyielding commitment on his face. Then he was running, dodging weapons fire as he made for an undamaged shuttlecraft. Alia wanted to pursue, to demand answers, but Lejour's forces were closing in. With a heavy heart, she retreated, using her chrono-psionic abilities to confound their attackers. As the shuttle carrying Ian and the surviving crew members streaked away from the protoplanet, Aaliyah caught a final glimpse of Fia's body. For a moment, she thought she saw it shimmer with an otherworldly light before the swirling cosmic gases engulfed it. Aaliyah's neural interface pulsed, carrying Ymir's urgent transmission. Fall back, regroup at Outpost Zeta. Whatever Omega has set in motion, this is only the beginning. Aaliyah's neural interface flickered with static as Ymir's transmission cut out. She stumbled through the wreckage of their ship, lungs burning from through gaps in the twisted metal. She glimpsed Ian's shuttle streaking away, a tiny speck against the swirling cosmic maelstrom. The protoplanet's surface shuddered beneath her feet. Lazar's troops scattered, their attack forgotten as reality itself seemed to warp and twist. Aaliyah's chrono-psionic senses screamed in overload. Time dilated, compressed, and folded in on itself. Aaliyah's neural interface crackled to life, overwhelmed by a surge of data. Images flooded her mind. Ian in his battered shuttle, his face contorted in rapture and anguish. She felt the echo of Omega's final gift, a psychic imprint of pure, unconditional love. Days later, Aaliyah stood on the scorched launch pad of Outpost Zeta, flanked by Ymir and the surviving crew. They watched in stunned silence as Ian's shuttle made its final approach. "Ian," Ymir called out, taking a hesitant step forward. The cocoon pulsed in response. Waves of raw data washed over them, overloading Aaliyah's neural interface. She caught fragments of information, glimpses of genetic codes rewritten, of consciousness expanded beyond mortal limits. Ymir's eyes blazed with newfound purpose. "The next step," he said, "the bridge between humanity and Pakled, a new lineage born from both." The chrysalis pulsed again, stronger this time. Aaliyah felt the tremors of change rippling outward, rewriting the very fabric of existence. The true test was only beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.